This is a St. Louis on the Air Extra. I'm Alex Hoyer. Earlier this week, the organization Better Together released its plan to merge St. Louis and St. Louis County. Many listeners submitted questions to our Curious Louis project. We asked some of those questions on St. Louis on the Air, which you can also listen to as part of this podcast, but we didn't have time for other questions. So our reporter Chad Davis sat down with Marius Johnson Malone and Dave Leipholtz after the show on Tuesday to ask more of your listener questions. The guests were the director and deputy director of community-based studies for Better Together. Chad Davis started by asking Dave Leipholtz why people in Missouri who live outside of St. Louis and St. Louis County should be incentivized to vote on the proposal.
From a local standpoint, it's because our division's embodied in the Constitution, so that's where we have to start. But I think when you talk to folks outstate, the question of why do I care, why does it impact me, is there's a lot of people that are really tied to St. Louis. And I think that we overplay the outstate animosity towards St. Louis. I think a lot of people come here for games, come here for shows, come here for the universities. And so I think there's a lot more of a connection there. I think the rural-urban divide is there, but they also value what St. Louis is, whether it is getting crops to the market or having a strong airport. And I think that when they come here, they want to be safe. And they also know that St. Louis is a big part of the economic engine in this state. And so they see value in that way.
When it comes to the makeup of St. Louis and St. Louis City, I know that there'll be 33 council members representing throughout, the St. Louis metro. So what's going to happen? Because I know that some of the municipalities, they'll still have, council members and aldermen. But what's going to happen to St. Louis City? Is St. Louis City still going to have their board of aldermen, or is that going to change at all?
No, so St. Louis City and St. Louis County are combining into this new metro city government. And so similar to how the county council will go away, the Board of Aldermen will no longer be around either. There will be left behind in St. Louis City a municipal corporation, which is intended to be there to handle any outstanding obligations for the city and any assets that remain there. So, for instance, the city currently has, I think, $800 million in debt, and there will be some tax streams that'll still be collected in the city of St. Louis to help pay down that debt over time.
Okay. So is it, because I know that for some of the other counties and cities in St. Louis, they were talking about part of the discussion was, a mayor or so will still have can still have a council or still have council members for that municipality. So you're saying St. Louis City, they'll have a different type of setup?
And so at the heart of that, the municipal corporation Marius talked about, but in St. Louis City, the reason for trying to preserve some of the structures in the county is that for whatever reason, over time, municipalities and communities have kind of become intertwined in how they're named and what their role in that, whether it's a farmer's market or a parade or all these quality of life types of activities. In St. Louis, those we found when we spoke to people were really embodied in neighborhood communities, and they may have a special district or something around that, but there was a different kind of infrastructure to maintaining that identity and that quality of life and that sense of community. And so we're confident that'll still be there because it already is in a larger city.
When it comes to this new metro system, how would the police department be structured? I guess one of the questions was just kind of how is it organized?
Can you just clarify the question a little bit? I want to make sure I understand it right.
Yeah, of course. So just the structures of it as far as rank and hierarchy when it comes to the police department.
Yeah, I mean, the current officers in the police departments across the region are going to be able to maintain their rank in the new police department. As far as the structure of, what are the patrols like, what do the different units look like, a lot of those decisions will have to be made by the Metro City once during the transition and over the course of time. So one of the early functions of the transition government that will be headed by the heads of the two combining counties, the mayor and the county executive, will be to select a police chief to begin implementation of those efforts in structuring that new department.
Yeah, and I think one of the other really key qualities that the task force wanted to implement was there's 4 deputy mayor positions that are put into this new government. One of them is a deputy mayor for public health and safety. And so what I think that does is really recognize that we're dealing with a lot of crossover between public health and public safety issues right now, whether it's mental health, whether it's the opioid crisis, whether it's toxic stress we're seeing in our neighborhoods. And for the first time, what we will have is someone who wakes up every day and there's one person whose job is to figure out how to holistically approach those. Because if you talk to police officers too, they're kind of the default for everything. If someone's having an issue with mental health care or stress or drugs, they go, and they have a specific skill set, but a lot of this is also a public health issue, and so we need to have those services working together and have that formalized in a new structure as well.
When it comes to this merger, and when it comes to St. Louis County and how St. Louis will be led, I know that you'll have over the transition period, or for those several years, you'll have the St. Louis County executive, you'll have the prosecutor and the assessor kind of governing over this St. Louis metro area. So why did it transfer over to the city or to the county rather, as opposed to the city when it comes to these positions?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons to take a step back is you're going to have a brand new 33-member legislature coming in, and so the idea was to have just a short 2-year period where executives continued on to continue and to provide continuity, because at the same time there's going to be transition still taking place. We have a 2-year formal transition period, but that really continues on for years, and so I think to have that there was really important. And at the end of the day, when we're consolidating 1,300,000, that just seemed to be what the other regions had done, is the larger entity stayed on for that transition, or if they have one, and so that's what we're looking to do here. And so really it's to get us to 2025 and to the government and the structure, and we can elect the leaders that we all want as a region.
Some individuals were wondering, what this will mean for county taxes. Will those be raised? Will those, stay the same? Will those change at all? Any idea on that specifically?
So initially, for most people, they will either see no change or actually a lowering of their county property tax in the area that is currently St. Louis County.
All right. And then another question that some had, when it comes to kind of the other municipalities or the other areas surrounding St. Louis, you have St. Charles and you have Jefferson County and other places, are there going to be any repercussions for those specific areas as a result of this merger?
I think, and what we've seen in other regions, is that there's a benefit. If you look at a lot of places that have done this, whether it's Indianapolis, Louisville, they tend to add more jobs than population. I think in Indianapolis, for every person they've added in population since they consolidated, which is I think around 60,000 or so, they've added 2 jobs, which means that people from outside of that urban core or suburban core are coming in to work, and so there's really value in that. And those communities outside, if you look at Fishers, Indiana, for example, has grown by like 700% because their economy has really grown off of Indianapolis's. So I think there's real value to having a strong anchor throughout the region.
That's Dave Leipoltz talking with St. Louis Public Radio reporter Chad Davis. Leipoltz is the director of community-based studies for Better Together and was joined by Deputy Director Marius Johnson Malone. The Better Together plan was released on Monday, and listeners had more questions than what we could get to when the guests appeared on St. Louis on the Air. Thanks for listening to this St. Louis on the Air Extra. I'm Alex Hoyer.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.